Welcome to a special voter education edition of Triad Today. Back in January, I spoke personally with both Attorney General Roy Cooper and Governor Pat McCrory and invited them to appear together today on this program. Governor McCrory said yes. Mr. Cooper said, "I'll have my people get back to you." Over the intervening months, I sent over a half dozen emails and made as many phone calls to Mr. Cooper's representatives, reminding them of today's program, and each time the reply was, "We'll get back to you." Finally, I pressed the issue, and 2 weeks ago I received an email saying that Mr. Cooper would not participate. Now, I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to why Mr. Cooper refused our invitation, but I can assure you that after giving him 10 months' notice, his absence here today is not due to a conflict on his schedule. Regardless, I'll spend the next half hour speaking with the one candidate who cared enough to actually show up and discuss the issues that concern all of us. Seated next to me now is the Honorable Pat McCrory, Governor of North Carolina. Welcome, Governor.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I would
Good to
have
see you.
loved to have Mr. Cooper here because we've had 3 debates and I've enjoyed all 3 debates.
Well, I know you have, and maybe that's why he's not here.
Yeah, we wanted actually about 4 or 5 more debates. I accepted every single debate, but because I'm so tired of campaigns being determined by 30-second TV ads, which usually mislead people and misinform people.
Ads and media reports that come in later. Let's start with the economy for a few minutes and then we'll get to some other things. Recap for us what was going on 4 years ago when you took office and where we are now.
Well, 4 years ago, North Carolina had the 5th highest unemployment rate in the country. We're about 9.4% unemployment. We were losing jobs right and left. We were even losing jobs to South Carolina.
Back then.
It can't get worse than that.
Yeah.
And we also owed the federal government $2.6 billion for unemployment that we borrowed from the federal government. I didn't know that until I became governor. And then we had a $500 million misforecast on Medicaid spending. We had the highest income tax and corporate tax in the Southeast, and government was very, very inefficient. So I walked into a situation where not only did we have to lead change, we had to become change agents. And you know, when you become a change agent, you step on toes of both the right and the left, and I was kind of an outsider coming in because, you know, I didn't get my pedigree that you usually have in Raleigh. I wasn't Attorney General, I wasn't Lieutenant Governor.
Right, you were mayor of Charlotte for 14 years.
Which, you know, people go, what the heck's that? So even among my own Republicans, I was an outsider. But I surrounded myself with very smart people, other outsiders, and we became problem solvers, and we strategized, and we've made a heck of a lot of positive change in 3 years, and the results speak for themselves. We paid off the $2.6 billion in debt for unemployment, and now I'm glad to report as of 2 weeks ago, we have $2 billion in reserves for unemployment. So if we have another recession, we don't have to tax businesses.
You'll be ready for it.
We're ready for it. And now, in fact, even with the storms, I'm waiving some unemployment rules and procedures, and guess what money we do that with?
You've got
$2 billion in reserves.
Absolutely. Before we go to break, I want to mention something I was reading. The median average income has risen nationwide by 7%. That's supposed to be the big thing that people on the right and the left say, well, if you want to see how a candidate's doing, median average income. Right. Nationwide, 7%. You've got it up 20%.
Right.
How come we never hear about that?
Because the other side, Roy Cooper, keeps changing the subject to other social issues, or he goes, you know, I've talked to some people who say they're working harder and longer than ever before. No, the issue is they're working now. They were not working 4 years ago, they're working now.
Right.
So that's politics, and what I try to talk is the facts, not the rhetoric.
30 seconds, very quickly. Would you like to see NAFTA repealed and TPP defeated?
I think it needs to be changed, no doubt about it. I think it's been bad for North Carolina for the past 30 years, especially the Triad.
Right. Yeah, it was devastating. Lots of jobs lost. We will pick up with this and much more. Before we get to our next topic, let's talk about the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. Give us an update on what happened, the destruction, and what you're doing to help.
Well, the storm was totally unexpected. All the experts said it'd go out at Charleston, but the good news is my team made some very good calls where they recommended that I make good calls. I just followed their lead and get the credit for it. But my team said, keep the resources spread out across the state just in case this thing turns.
Right.
We almost moved all the resources to the southeast. And Mike Sprayberry, my emergency operations director, it was one of the best appointments I've ever made. He said, keep someone in Kinston, keep some of our guard in Kinston, keep some in Whiteville, keep some in Williamston.
Really smart.
And it just worked out. The storm went up to Fayetteville, total flooding in
And you just
Fayetteville.
came back from, before we taped this show, as a matter of fact, we're taping on Wednesday, October 26th, for the record. You just got back in from where, Kinston?
Kinston, yeah. We just opened up a store that had been closed for 10 days, but I also saw a lot of houses that were totally destroyed, people looking for homes in Kinston and Princeville and Goldsboro, along every major river basin. All that water, which landed in Fayetteville and Raleigh on that evening, where we still played football games, by the way, which was wrong.
Yeah.
I haven't said this out loud, but we canceled football games due to social issues, but a hurricane.
Yeah, I know.
We lost some people coming back from that game.
Well, I know, and the thing is, the hurricane was devastating. And a quick question on that, and then I want to move on to something else. And that is, you had this large rainy day fund built up, which Roy Cooper and others said that that's crazy. You shouldn't have put all that money into a rainy day fund. Helped out, didn't it?
A week before the hurricane, Roy was actually a week or two before the hurricane. Roy was in Lumberton and gave a speech in all places Lumberton, which was hit the hardest, one of the poorest areas of the state. And he gave a speech saying the governor put too much in the rainy day fund. He should have spent the money on teacher pay raises, infrastructure. No, that's exactly what we shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
But during campaign seaon, people like to make
Fortunately, you had
promises.
that money because now you're able. You're able to help people. Now
rained.
let's go to HB2. I want you to give me a recap. Give me like a 2-minute recap, and here's what I want you to include in there. What forced the state to act? What kind of deadlines did Mayor Roberts put you under? What was your involvement in crafting HB2? Did you try at any time to reach a compromise? Where do we stand now?
Sure. Well, it started with a group called the HRC, Human Rights Campaign, very, very powerful national group, convinced Mayor Roberts and helped her get elected to pass a mandate on all private sector entities that have public facilities, restrooms, locker rooms, showers, a mandate that they must recognize gender identity or gender expression. In other words, a man who thinks he's a woman would be allowed to use the woman's shower.
Right, which we never really had a problem with before because nobody knew.
No one talked about it.
So they do the ordinance.
By the way, the ordinance, most people don't know this. If you didn't do the ordinance, you could get a $500 fine or a 30-day jail sentence.
Great.
A city
But this was unconstitutional, right? Is that what forced the...
It should have been, the Attorney General should have declared it unconstitutional and intervened immediately. But he refused to do it because he was in the pocket and doing fundraisers with the mayor at that time too.
Now the ordinance, though, overreached the power of the city council in Charlotte anyway, and you didn't even call the General Assembly into session.
No, I begged the mayor not to do it. I wrote them a letter on the day. He said, you're trying to find a solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
Look, I'm going to be careful how I word this. Did the Attorney General, did the Mayor of Charlotte, anybody was there any kind of collusion here to say we're going to put the governor between a constitutional rock and a political hard place?
This national campaign came to North Carolina for only one reason. It was called the governor's race and the president.
Let me tell you what friends of mine say.
A lot of money.
When I say, look, the governor didn't have anything to do with writing this, he says, yeah, but Jim, he shouldn't have signed it. There's my question quickly. Why didn't you just say, I'm not signing this?
Because if I wouldn't have signed it, there's 15 or 20 days, I forget the exact rules, the law was going to go into effect in Charlotte within 8 days. If I didn't sign it, the law would have gone into effect. I'm not going to allow an ordinance threatening a jail sentence to someone who doesn't recognize gender identity, a whole new definition of man and woman or boy and girl in our schools too.
Right.
Now when I did sign it, I said there are portions of this bill I don't like, and I've changed almost every portion of those bills. I reinstated the courts for discrimination, which was wrong for my legislature to do, and I stated as such, but I got it changed. Got no credit. The liberal media.
And you tried to keep them from doing this.
And I did an executive order prohibiting any types of discrimination based on sexual orientation or hiring or firing.
Let me. I was going to ask this when we talk about education, but let me get this in now, since you mentioned schools.
Real quick, before I run prisons too. The next governor will run prisons. I've now got male prisoners who want to be transferred to the female prison.
Yeah, well, I won't even comment on that. Now, but the president issued 13,000 letters to school superintendents a few months ago and said, you better make these accommodations for transgender students, or we're going to cut off your federal funds.
Right.
Now, the courts have stayed that for a while, but suppose that goes into effect. in January, or something happens that goes into effect. What's your crystal ball say? Will parents pull their kids out of school, go to private schools or homeschool? Will local school boards say, we don't want your federal funds?
Universities too.
Or will they buckle under and say, we'll take the federal funds? What do you think is going to happen?
It'll go to the Supreme Court. That's why this presidential election is important too. But most people don't even know that. You know that. Most people don't know the Justice Department. This started in Charlotte and Houston, Texas.
That's everywhere.
And now the Obama administration has put in order. But 21 other states have joined North Carolina.
But they only came after you because you're so good looking. That's my, I don't know what they think.
It's because I have hair that looks like you.
Yeah, well, they might come after me next. Now, as governor, you can't repeal HB 2, so how does this get resolved? You don't have the power to just repeal it. What happens?
No. Most likely what I see, the Supreme Court will determine the definition of gender. It's really a federal issue. We don't need 18 or 150 different civil rights acts. We have one civil rights act, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It's the federal government that determines what is discrimination and what is not. And I've stated this over and over again.
Based on that act.
I wonder if every town had their own discrimination clauses on, are you protected? Are you protected? Winston-Salem has one, Kernersville has another one, Greensboro has another one. That's no way to run a country.
This had an effect on you personally, but forgetting you for a second, you're a public figure, but your wife, Ann, didn't she get disinvited because of this whole thing?
We've both been disinvited to things.
To stay.
There's almost an Orwellian concept of if you disagree on this issue, you're purged.
Yeah.
And there's this big brother thought police that if you think differently, you're wrong, and therefore we don't want to interact with you anymore. And I have a lot of people I wave with them with 5 fingers, and they wave back with 1.
Yeah, I know which one.
And that's a sad commentary.
It is.
I have no problem disagreeing with someone. If someone wants to change the definition of gender from your anatomy to gender identity or gender expression, let's have that discussion.
The most hate mail I've ever gotten on my column was because and you and I disagree on some things, but I defended you on the HB2 thing, most of it, and got hate mail you wouldn't believe.
It's pretty brutal. It's been brutal for me and my wife, but I'm not getting shot at yet. I've been after a few threats, but
well, we're going to make this next segment a little bit more pleasant. We're going to talk about education, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Turn and talk about education. You were criticized in one of the debates with Roy Cooper. He said, "Yeah, we're 41st in the nation in teacher pay."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there watching and said, 40, I'm trying to do the math, and I thought, wait a minute, there's something else to this. And you came back and said,
we were 48th when I got elected. And next year we'll be 33, 34 based upon the policies that we passed in the last 3 months.
Did he just not do math well, or?
No, he's misleading the public. And he's been told that by even the liberal newspapers saying, red light or whatever they call it. But if you repeat something enough, and that's what the teachers union does, where Pat McCrory has North Carolina at 41st in the nation. Yeah, from 48 to 41st.
Came up 7 points.
Down to 32.
It'll be at 32.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to fight that, though. He's got 3 times more money than I do. So,
despite the gains that you've made, though, let's talk about teacher retention.
Sure.
Because there's no doubt that even though you were making great strides in giving raises to teachers, trying to up salaries and doing things like that, still Virginia and other states were trying to recruit teachers out from under us, young teachers and veteran teachers. Yeah. And I've moderated some local debates with mayors and school board candidates and whatever, and they sort of throw their hands up and say, what are we going to do to retain our teachers, keep them from being stolen from us?
Well, actually, the numbers are different there, too. We've lost 1,000 teachers to other states, and we gained 2,000 teachers from other states.
I didn't know that.
No one knows that. We repeat it over and over again, but the commercials say we've lost over 1,000 teachers to other states. What it didn't say was part 2, we gained 2,000 teachers. That's a net gain of 1,000 teachers that we recruited from other states coming to North Carolina.
This has nothing to do with anything except you mentioned TV ads a couple times. I floated an idea in my column a couple years ago that there ought to be a federal fine for anybody knowingly putting false information in a TV ad, like a $100,000 fine.
No, he put accurate information. He just didn't complete the sentence. And
that's a grammar problem.
Once it's up there, it's there and people believe it, and the media keeps repeating it too.
Let's talk about something. You were on the show earlier this year when we were pushing for, and you got it successfully passed, was the Connect NC bond. It was a $2 billion bond. Yeah. I was just amazed because you had Democrats coming from everywhere. We had, your former opponent, the Honorable Walter Dalton, drove from like 3 hours.
Who was a tougher debate than Roy Cooper.
Yeah, and you all were like this, and then he drove all the way, like 3 hours here to be here to support what you were doing. I mean, a great bipartisan effort. It passed. How will colleges and community college universities, how are they going to benefit from the fact this thing passed?
Because they're going to spend the money on areas where we have skills gaps. And I made sure for the universities, for example, we're going to spend the money in those areas where we need it. Not football stadiums, not basketball arenas, not swimming pools, not new student centers. We're building a new engineering building at North Carolina A&T. Because why? We need it. They have 3 buildings that are just horrendous. One built in the 60s, 30s, and 40s. Winston-Salem State University is going to get a new business-type building. It's in horrible shape.
UNCG's getting a new building.
UNCG's a nursing facility. Guess why? We have a shortage of nurses. Appalachian State, nursing and science facility. Western Carolina, a science lab. The Western Carolina lab, my lab at Ragsdale High School in Guilford County was in better shape 30 years ago than the Western Carolina lab.
And the bond helping.
And the chancellor knows that. He doesn't mind me
No,
saying
I know. And the bond package also helped shore up some much-needed facilities to help community college and National Guard.
And our state parks.
State parks.
Our National Guard facilities, in fact, one in High Point was an embarrassment, built in the 1940s or 50s. It couldn't even fit in our new equipment. And they didn't have, by the way, facilities for women. But maybe if it goes according to Obama, we don't need that. I don't know.
No, you shouldn't say things like that about our president.
The president.
He might be gender confused on some things, but you can't make comments like that on this show.
But our Guard has done a great job. They did a great job in Charlotte during the riots, and I'm very proud of that decision. I'm very proud of what the Guard did.
We're going to get to some safety issues. I want to ask you about the Charlotte situation, and I'll steal some time from this segment and add it to the next one because I want to talk to you about the Charlotte issue when we come right back. Here, Governor, let's pick back up. I want to talk about public health and safety issues for a few minutes. The state crime lab has been a hot political issue in all these TV spots. I don't want to get into all this back and forth stuff, but just give me a quick recap. What's going on with the state crime lab?
Well, it's been really broken for about 20 years. When Easley was Attorney General, it was broken then because I was mayor of Charlotte. It was so bad that we put another $1 million and expanded our own crime lab in Charlotte because we couldn't afford to wait for the tests. It was taking 1 year to 2 years to get tests back, and people were sitting in county jails.
So how is it now?
Not much better. A little of the backlog has come back, but a lot. In a commercial, Mr. Cooper says he's eliminated the backlog. No, all he did was contract it out. Now the backlog's just not in the office, but
it's somewhere else backlog. Yeah. All right, let's get to the crisis in Charlotte. You were mayor there for like 14 years.
14 years.
And thanks in part to what you were doing down there, it became and I'm not just making this up, I mean, you can look it up, it's a model police department. It has diverse hiring, it has community policing, all the great things everybody says you need to have. And yet, a black officer shot a black suspect. Mm-hmm. And as African American radio host Larry Elder pointed out, it made no sense for people to even protest, much less riot. It didn't make any sense, but it happened. Now, Black Lives Matter has a great noble purpose, but do you think that the way they protested and the way the media covered everything exacerbated that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you talk to anyone outside of North Carolina, they probably think 3,000 protesters came. It was 300. We never had over 300 protesters, but among those 300, we probably had 50 or 60 anarchists. And it doesn't take many anarchists to cause.
People came from out of state. There was a person.
Out of state, in state, but people who they didn't know what the issue was.
CNN covered it wall to wall. They said, Don Lemon said, well, we have an obligation to cover this.
Don Lemon was outrageous. He was outrageous.
You don't have an obligation to exacerbate something.
Well, that morning, I saw what was happening, and I know the city that I was mayor of pretty well, so I called the mayor and them and said, do you need the National Guard to offer you anything? They said, no, not now. But I went in and got on the phone with my general and said, let's get them. Because you can't just snap your fingers and get the National Guard.
Right.
So
you came under fire for, in the aftermath of that, for putting restrictions on the release of body cam footage. Mm-hmm. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't say it can't be released. No. You put restrictions on it. Now, why did you put any restrictions on it?
Because we have to protect not only the rights of the public's right to know, but we have to protect the constitutional rights of the victim and also the constitutional rights of the person being investigated for a murder, which includes the police officer. A police officer does not lose their constitutional rights because they have a badge on. And a judge should make that decision, not Don Lemon with CNN, not the mayor of Charlotte, not the governor of North Carolina or the DA. Let a judge, an independent judge, determine, okay, if we release this video, how does that jeopardize a jury? How does that jeopardize the evidence? How does that jeopardize community relations? Let an independent
arbiter. But you can see it in court. They can make their
absolutely.
determination.
In fact, you could maybe get the video still within 3 or 4 days. It also says the family gets to see the video.
Family gets to see it. Now let me turn to some health issues. The big thing, I want to go back to this Duke Energy coal ash pond leaks that affected especially the Dan River. There was a letter that went out from the state earlier this year, and the wording of it said something to the effect of the safety of the water is okay, it meets federal safety standards, you can drink the water. Was there anything in that letter that misled anybody? Did people drink unsafe water?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's the same standards that President Obama promotes in Winston-Salem, High Point, and Greensboro in the Triad. It's those same water standards that we follow. And again, that's another kind of third-party super PAC that's promoting this controversy. And it's a very sad commentary on how we're misleading the people about the safety of our water.
But you used to work for Duke Energy, so people were making a connection. Well, maybe he's going to go easy on
Oh,
Duke
no
Energy.
doubt about it. In fact, I worked for Duke Energy 8 years ago. I have no pension. I have no health insurance. I have nothing. But my opponent, actually, Roy Cooper, he and Beverly Perdue, both endorsed by my boss at the time, didn't endorse me. When I left the company, they didn't endorse me for governor.
So
They
let me get
endorsed
this straight.
Beverly Perdue.
The people that dump the pollution out are endorsing your opponent.
Yeah.
It's
They did endorse
mind-boggling.
my opponent, and not only that, they gave $10 million to the Democratic Party, and it has yet to be paid back.
Wow. Do you favor putting a cap on health insurance premiums? And please say yes.
I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to get rid of Obamacare. And how we
Yeah,
do
but those
that.
premiums were higher before then. You know that.
No, they're much higher now.
I know they are,
I mean,
but-
they are exploding. And sadly, my opponent was a big advocate of Obamacare. I challenged Obamacare by myself without the help of the Attorney General. And I joined 30 other states, or 21, I forget the number. And we lost in a 4-4-1 decision. It's disastrous. I'd like to have our own, I'd like a program which goes across state lines and has competition.
We need it. We need it. There are a couple quick things. Voter ID law will not be in effect for November 8th. Are you still thinking there might be some voter fraud without it?
I think we're foolish to think that no one will try voter fraud. I don't think it'll be to the degree that it'll impact the election, hopefully, but voter ID being rejected, and when it's in 33 other states, was purely a political move by the Richmond court.
Yeah.
And sadly, my Attorney General, who's my opponent, raised money. While defending photo ID, he sent out fundraising cards criticizing photo IDs. Any lawyer who'd do that would be fired.
As Gomer Pyle used to say, what a dumb thing to do. Now, do we need a shorter election season, do you think? The Brits have a month.
I'd love a shorter election system.
Makes sense.
With a
doesn't it?
lot of debates.
A lot of debates.
A lot of debates.
30-day window, that's what we need.
Love it.
I want to
But
give you a
that's a
chance
parliamentary
to,
system.
I don't know, Brian, what camera should he look into? I want to give him a chance just to look. You want to look over there? Look in that camera for about a minute, minute and a half.
Just look?
Just direct, well, no, you got to
Just
say
look?
something. No, don't just look, because that would look different. But just look in there and tell folks at home, without me getting in the middle of it, no question, just tell why you should be reelected.
Well, I should be reelected because of leadership. And now more than ever, our country, our state needs leadership. Leadership that's willing to make the tough decisions. And I made the tough decisions 4 years ago when I became the 74th governor of the United States of America, of North Carolina. And the fact of the matter is, we had the 5th highest unemployment rate. We owed $2.6 billion to the federal government. Teachers had not gotten pay raises in 5 years. The list goes on and on and on. We fix those problems, and we continue to have a great vision for the future to improve our roads, to improve our mental health system, and to also lower the cost of our universities for our kids. That's what leadership is all about, is successful results, not rhetoric.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate you doing the program.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the
much.
opportunity. It's an honor to be governor.